We've been continuing our topic of encounters with Jesus, and we've just studied the first encounter that some of his disciples had with Jesus. The New Testament gives us more than one episode in this business of the calling of the disciples. I think for some of them it took more than one encounter with Jesus for them to finally decide that they would be his followers, that they would leave their other employment and become full-time followers of Jesus. We see just such an account in Luke chapter 5. And when we come to Luke chapter 5, we come to this great locale where so many of Jesus' lessons were taught, where so much of his time was spent, namely the Sea of Galilee. It says that at the Sea of Galilee in verse 3, he got into one of the boats. It was actually the boat owned by Simon Peter. It wasn't a pleasure boat, it was a business boat. It was the family business of fishing out on that lake. And it says in verse 3 that Jesus sat down in the boat and he taught the people while he was in the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, he'd finished speaking, but he wasn't finished teaching. And by the way, there's a difference between teaching and training. What's the difference? In teaching, you simply tell somebody something. In training, you let somebody do something while you watch them and while you coach them. So we're prepared for an encounter that involves a bit of training, and it also involves probably the final commitment when Simon Peter and the others say, we're going to follow him. We're going to leave our business of fishing, and we're going to do now what he tells us to do. So he says to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. Now, Simon Peter responds to that, you know what, we've been working all night long. We've been trying to catch fish all night long, and they're just not out there right now. And so this would really be futile. It would be a waste of time for us to do this. But because you've asked us to, at your word, at your bidding, because you're asking us, we'll do it. So it's very significant what's happening here. And because we have to ask the question, what is a carpenter from Nazareth? Nazareth is at some distance from the water. What does a carpenter from Nazareth know about fishing on the lake? And this carpenter from Nazareth is telling professional fishermen what to do. Now here's something that is fairly common. We all have our own area of expertise. Most of us do. At least we all have some part of our life that we think we know all about. We think we're pretty much in control of it. We even may think that we know more about it than God knows about it. We may even think that, you know, God can have this and this and this and this and this, but this right here I keep to myself. This is off limits. It may be money. It may be sex. It may be a relationship. It may be time. It may be family. Where you kind of think, you know, I know all about this. I've got this under control. You can have this, but you can't have this. Now, we don't say that out loud, but that's what we act like, and that's the way we operate. Well, they thought they knew pretty much everything there was to know about that lake. That's where they lived, that's where they worked. They thought they pretty much knew everything anybody could know about fishing. That was their job. That was their profession. That's what their father did. That's what they did. They'd been doing it since they were children. They knew everything about it. So Jesus tells them something about their job that they wouldn't have done. They wouldn't have done what he told them to do. But here's one thing about a disciple. A disciple says, verse 5, Just because you say to do it, we'll do it. A disciple doesn't need any other reason to do what he does, except that he knows this is what Jesus wants. Once we know what Jesus wants, we know what to do. Once we know what Jesus tells us to do, we know how to obey. We don't really need to know anything else. All we need to know is what it is he wants us to do. So it says in verse 6 that when Peter did what Jesus told him to do, not what he would have done if he had not heard the command of Jesus, they enclosed a large number of fish so that their nets were breaking. There were so many fish that they had to call other people from other boats to help them, from another boat to help them. And then after they filled both boats, the boats began to sink. So there are three things here. First, there are the broken nets. Then there's the extra boat. Then there are the sinking boats. That's how great the harvest was. That's how great the result was. Unbelievable result. So what's happened so far? He's told them to do something that is actually tiresome. They've been fishing all night. They don't feel like going back out there again. So he gives them an assignment that's exhausting after they're already exhausted. What he tells them to do is tiresome. They're already tired. It's going to make them more weary. Secondly, he gives them an assignment that they think is futile. That is, they don't think it's going to do any good because they've been out there all night looking for fish and there are not any fish out there right now. So he gives them something to do that's going to make them more exhausted. He gives them something to do that's not going to do any good as far as they know, and yet they do what he tells them to do just because he tells them to do it. And they have a measure of success that they probably never had before. I don't know how many times the nets break. I used to live on the seacoast of North Carolina. There was a member of my church who was a tugboat captain. I went out with him on the tugboat only one time, the only time I've ever been on a tugboat in my life. They were making the cables secure on two sides of the ship that we were towing in. Once they made the cable secure to the side of the ship, I asked the tugboat captain, I had a friend with me from England. That's why I went out there, so he could have the experience. I asked the tugboat captain, how often does one of those cables break? He said, almost never. As soon as he said that, the cable broke. Almost never, but it broke right after I asked the question. My friend from England was very impressed. Now, I don't know how often the nets broke, but I'll bet there was never a time when they had to get an extra boat, the nets broke, and both boats sank because there were too many fish. Why did that happen? Well, it happened for, I think, two reasons. It happened to prove to them that Jesus knew something about their field that they didn't know. And I think secondly, it happened so they would never forget it. If they only got some good fish, a good amount of fish, that would have been great, but they may have forgotten it. The fact that the nets broke, the fact that it took two boats, the fact that the boats sank, they would never forget that. They could never forget that. They would tell their children that for the rest of their lives. Jesus sent them to a dangerous place. He sent them out into the deep. He sent them to a weary place because they had fished all night. He sent them to a futile place because they'd fished but they hadn't caught anything. But there was a great, 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 great harvest. What did Jesus prove to Nathanael? He proved to Nathanael that he could see inside his heart what nobody else could see. What did Jesus prove to Peter and his co-workers, his co-fishermen? He proved to them that he could see under the sea. He could see something that they couldn't see. And he also knew more about their business than they knew. He knows more about our hearts than we know. He knows more about our business than we know. And you know what? We need to take the proof which was provided for Nathanael, and we need to take the proof that was provided for Simon Peter and make it our own. It's not necessary that he proves that to us, because he's already proved it to them, and their experience is our experience. That, again, is the great advantage that we have over these people. Remember what we said at the very beginning. Remember when we talked about what Jesus says in John 16:9, it's to your advantage that I go away, because I'm going to send the Holy Spirit. You know what the Holy Spirit's going to do? He's going to tell you what happened everywhere I went. He's going to tell you what happened with everybody I talked to. And He's going to make their experience your experience, so that you not only have the advantage that Nathanael gained in John chapter 1, but you will also have the advantage that Simon Peter gained in Luke chapter 5. It's proof enough that Jesus is who He said He is, that we can trust His promises, that when He tells us to do something, we do it. Now, we don't always have the advantage of immediate results. Sometimes He tells us what to do and nothing happens. Sometimes He may tell us to do something 1,000 times and nothing happens. The precious thing is not the harvest. The precious thing is the obedience. The precious thing is not the reward that we get for ourselves, more fish than we've ever gotten before. The precious thing is the reward of obedience that we yield to the Lord Jesus Christ. That's really the great reward, the reward that we give to Him. That's what we ought to commit ourselves to, and that's what we ought to celebrate. Now, after the boats begin to sink, in verse 8 it says, when Simon Peter saw it, he's obviously back on shore now, he falls down at Jesus' knees saying, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man." Think about that response. Simon Peter is learning who Jesus is. Once he learns who Jesus is, he knows who he is. And what he discovers about Jesus is not only that Jesus is powerful, but that He's good. Not only is He great, but He's clean. Theologians talk about the attributes of God, the characteristics of God. What is God like? What is true about God? They divide those attributes into two categories. There are God's essential attributes. Those are the attributes which make God God, the so-called omni attributes. God is omniscient. He knows everything. God is omnipotent. That means He's all-powerful. He can do anything. God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. There is no place where God is not. These are the attributes of power and capacity which make God God. He can do anything. But there are also not just the essential attributes, but there are the moral attributes of God. The essential attributes are the proofs that God is a great God. The moral attributes are the proofs that God is a good God. He's not only great, He's good. What are the moral attributes of God? Well, His forgiveness, His patience, His grace, His mercy, His love. We can look at the universe that He made. We can look at the stars and the galaxies. We can look at the mountains and the sea and know that He's great. But we can't know that He's good by looking at the universe. We learn that He's good by what He tells us about Himself and by what He shows us through His Son Jesus. But somehow, When Simon Peter saw this demonstration of Jesus' great knowledge, that he knew that the fish were there, and his great power, that he could bring so many fish into that boat, Simon Peter also knew that Jesus was good, and he falls down at his feet.
Even a small contribution can make a big difference. Jesus fed 5,000 people because of a little boy's 5 loaves. Regardless of the amount, your contribution is very important and greatly appreciated. Visit us at tvsseminary.com.
I want to mention Jesus' commitment to using us, what we call human instrumentality. Maybe years ago in Sunday school, a Sunday school teacher or a Bible teacher, or maybe a pastor or preacher said to you, God needs you, or Jesus needs you. He doesn't. That's not true. That teacher was mistaken. God does not need us. Jesus does not need us. But He chooses to use us anyway. Now here's the question. Did Jesus need the nets of the disciples, the hands of the disciples, the boats of the disciples to get fish? Absolutely He did not. We're looking now at some of the first lessons that Jesus taught the disciples in their first encounters with them. Do you know what one of the last lessons He taught was? Do you know that He taught another lesson on that lake the same way in John 21, the last chapter of the Gospel of John? And do you know that they had also been out all night and they didn't have any fish? And do you know what He said to them? He said, come on in and have some breakfast. You know what Jesus was serving for breakfast? He was serving fish. Where did He get the fish? I don't know. But I do know that He didn't need them to get the fish. He could get plenty of fish by Himself. He didn't need them. But here's the wonderful thing. We'll see this again when we look at the raising of Lazarus in John 11. He uses their hands. He uses their nets. He uses their boats. He uses their willingness to get fish. He doesn't need us to bring people to faith, to salvation, to heaven, to Christ. He doesn't need us at all. But He calls us to participate with Him in His great work of man fishing, which we'll talk about in a moment. By the way, the greatest places where there's a revival today, the places where there's a great harvest, and the places where most people are coming to Christ right now is in the Muslim world. We don't hear much about it. The reason we don't hear much about it is because it's dangerous to talk about it. Because the Muslims will kill those people if they realize they're coming to Christ. Now, how are they coming to Christ? Well, many of them are coming to Christ through dreams and visions. I went to a closed Muslim country, I won't say which one, in 2005. I was sitting in a circle of 11 people. We went around the circle and told everybody how we came to faith in Jesus. 8 of those people were Muslim background believers. 3 of us were Westerners. Of the 8, there were 14 of us. 11 were Muslim background believers. When we went around the circle to tell everybody how we came to know Jesus, I thought those 11 people would say, well, we came to know Jesus because somebody like you came in here from the West to teach us about Jesus. Not one person said that. 8 of the 11 Muslim background believers said they came to Jesus because Jesus appeared to them in a dream or in a vision. Now, why is that happening? Well, I think one reason it's happening is because missionaries like me are afraid to go in there. We're afraid to go in there because we're afraid the Muslims might kill us. So God says, okay, you're afraid to do what I tell you to do. I'll just do it myself. I'll just do it myself. You see, He doesn't need us, but He gives us the great privilege of participating with Him in the harvest. All we have to do is to do what He says. And so when Peter did what he said, there was a great harvest. He didn't need Peter. They could have gone out there in the boat and Jesus could have said, cover your heads. The fish are about to land in the boat. And then they would have been covered up by flying fish coming into the boat. They didn't need the hands. They didn't need the nets. Jesus didn't need the hands or nets. He could have gotten the fish into the boat any way He wanted to. He could have got the fish over into the grill any way He wanted to. Now, once Peter realized who Jesus was, he realized who he was. Once he realized how clean Jesus was, he realized how unclean he was. This is why we said earlier that it's difficult for a sinner to come into the presence of innocence. It's difficult for unrighteousness to come into the presence of perfection. That's not an easy thing to do. And Peter said, go away, I'm not worthy. Now, I'm afraid that some of our great Christian leaders today, maybe some who are on television or radio, maybe some who raise a lot of money, would have walked up to Jesus and put their arm around Him and say, this is great. We're going to set records all over this lake. We're going to catch more fish than anybody's ever caught. You just tell us where to go. We'll catch the fish. We're going to be great partners, you and me. Peter didn't do that. He said, don't come near me. I'm not worthy to be in your presence. You're clean, but I'm not clean. You see, when we really get to know the Lord, when the Lord is really using us, we don't think, hey, this is great. I must be really great. The Lord's using me. No. We realize, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be used by the Lord. I'm not worthy to be in the presence of the Lord. And this is what happens with Peter. And Jesus says to him and to the partners, James and John, who were Peter's partners in the fishing business and who also became Jesus' disciples, Jesus says, do not be afraid. You've probably heard that the most repeated command in the Bible is do not be afraid. We are commanded not to be afraid more than we're commanded anything else. And that is an internal commandment. But maybe it's the practical result of fear that we're really being commanded of, because we can't always control our emotions. Maybe what the commandment means is don't be ruled by your fear. Do what I tell you to do, even though you may be afraid. One thing it means is that if we listen to Jesus and try to do what He tells us to do, a lot of scary stuff is going to happen. So He has to keep telling us over and over, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. It's been said, I don't know if it's really true, and I've never counted it myself. It sounds too perfect to be true, so I don't say it as fact. I just say that this is something you hear a lot. That there are actually 365 commands in the Bible not to be afraid. One for every day. Don't be afraid. Every day, don't be afraid. And then Jesus says, from now on, you will be catching men. That's a promise. That's a prophecy. That's a command. That's a vision. That's Jesus' vision for you. That you'll be catching not fish, but men and women for the kingdom of God. Now, here's an interesting thing that we need to think about. And here's something that we overlook. This is a deep, deep insight. This is the Greek New Testament right here. I'm going to share a deep, deep insight from the original languages, something that probably no one else has ever noticed except for me. Are you ready for this? And I'm joking. Are you ready for this deep insight? Do you have your seatbelt fastened? Are you ready to learn something that you never thought of before? Are you ready? Fish don't want to be caught. You got that? Fish don't want to be caught. We don't witness very much because they don't want to talk about it. They don't like it. Well, of course they don't. That's why you have to catch them. If they wanted to be caught, you wouldn't have to catch them. But you know what? Fish don't want to be caught. Deep down in their thinny little fishy hearts, no fish really wants to be caught, to be speared, to be gigged, to be scaled, to be filleted, to be fried, to be swallowed. No fish really wants that. They just don't. They don't think it's a good idea. So they swim away. They try to avoid being caught. That's why we have to catch them. We have to catch them because they don't want to be caught. But you know what? If we let Him, Jesus will teach us how to catch fish. He will teach us how to catch men. But we've got to try. We can't just say, I'm afraid, or, they don't want to talk about it. They might not like me. They may not like me if I talk about Jesus. That may make them uncomfortable. Let me tell you something. If they die without Jesus, they're really going to be uncomfortable. So the whole point is to keep them from being uncomfortable. Jesus teaches Peter and James and John that He knows more about their business than they do. So that after He proves that, they will believe Him when He begins to teach them about His business. Because we don't know anything about His business. His business is the business of catching men and women, of bringing unbelievers to faith in Jesus Christ, bringing people who are following their own will, doing their own business, to the place where they follow the Lord Jesus Christ, they listen to Him, and they do His business. What an exciting thing to think He's going to teach us how to catch men and women for Himself. That's the end of this session.